Tim Allen has been in many movies and TV shows throughout the years, playing iconic characters such as Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story franchise and Tim Taylor in Home Improvement. He tends to play these characters as an exaggeration of himself, a man's man, if you will. However, the most iconic and prestigious role of Tim Allen's career is Santa Claus. Today, we're going to be talking about the Tim Allen Santa Claus connected universe and its far-reaching implications on Christmas as a whole. So grab your favorite hot cocoa, bundle up, and allow me to show you the most insane Christmas theory you've seen this year. To go over every detail in the Tim Allen Santa Claus cinematic universe would take a long time, and as much as I'd love for this video essay to be 3 hours long, I decided to spare you all the 20 plus pages of information. If you want to see my notes on this topic, there's a link in the description. Anyways, we start with the first film in the franchise, The Santa Claus. Like with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this might be the first film created, however, it is not the first thing to canonically take place. I will include a timeline towards the end of the video to recap, because to do it all at once would take forever, and it will confuse a lot of people. We're starting here because most people are familiar with this film the most. This film also sets some of the rules in this cinematic universe that do become very, and I mean it, very important later. So, to keep everyone at the same page at the same time, we're going to start off with the first film. Directed by John Pasquin and written by Leo Bevenuti and Steve Rudnick, I hope I got those right, we'll see, we get to the early beginnings of the Santa Claus franchise. We start off in the same year of the film's release, in 1994. Scott Calvin, our main character, works for a toy company in Lakeside, Illinois. This is important because most Christmas movies have their setting in either Illinois or the North Pole, including, but not limited to, Home Alone, Office Christmas Party, A Bad Mom's Christmas, Surviving Christmas, Christmas Lost and Found, Christmas with the Cranks, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Happy Christmas, Nothing Like the Holidays, The Christmas Chronicles, The Holidate, Fred Claus, and probably more. Scott Calvin is spending Christmas Eve with his son Charlie, while Laura, his ex-wife, drops Charlie off.
I'll be right there, just a sec.
Scott finds out that Charlie doesn't really believe in Santa Claus anymore.
Uh-oh.
This makes Scott upset, but tries to make up for the evening by cooking dinner.
Lord, what is happening in there?
Aurora Borealis?
Aurora Borealis. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within your kitchen.
Yes.
That's it?
No.
So they end up at Denny's.
Everybody likes Denny's. It's an American institution.
That night, Scott and Charlie are woken up by a noise on the roof. Scott startles Santa Claus, who then slips and falls off the roof and is now lifeless.
He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
The previous Santa vanishes, leaving behind a red suit and business card. This enacts the Santa Claus.
Charlie, stay where you are. Charlie, would you listen to me? Stay up there.
It is Santa. You killed him.
There are other hidden clauses on this card, each smaller than the previous. There are in total 4 legal clauses to the Santa contract. Number 1, the Santa Claus. In putting on the suit and entering the sleigh, the wearer waives any and all rights to any previous identity, real or implied, and fully accepts the duties and responsibilities of the Santa Claus in perpetuity until such a time that the wearer becomes unable to do so by either accident or design. 2. The Mrs. Claus. The cardholder acknowledges that he shall in timely fashion and customary manner pursue courtship to a woman of his choosing for the express intent of finding true love and obtaining, with the knowing consent of this partner, the state of holy matrimony. Should the cardholder fail to sanctify the requirements enumerated herein, he further acknowledges permanent and irrevocable forfeiture of all rights, duties, and responsibilities as enforced upon him by the Santa Claus. Not valid in the state of Utah. Number 3, the escape clause. If the cardholder no longer wishes to be Santa, he may put his hand on his personal snow globe and wish to no longer be Santa. This will enact the escape clause, sending the current Santa back to his timeline before picking up the coat, nulling all responsibility as the entity Santa Claus. Number 4, successes clause. An addendum to the Santa Claus if he no longer has the capacity or desire to be Santa anymore, granting a successor. Now, as much as I would like to nerd out about legal contracts, I'll give you the basics here. Contracts must include mutual assent, expressed by a valid offer and acceptance, adequate consideration, capacity, and legality. I would love to see a real lawyer like Legal Eagle talk about the validities of this contract and whether or not it would be legally binding. I am not a seated judge, I could not give my ruling on that. However, I will link an article I found talking about whether or not it would be viable as a binding contract in Australian law. I think here in the United States you could make a few good arguments on whether or not the contract follows the bargain theory of consideration and the benefit-detriment theory of consideration. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I could never defend you in the case for Santa Claus. I don't think that this contract would be legally binding. However, this would totally be similar to a fey contract. Magical contracts have always been a thing in fantasy where you have certain rules and laws that you don't mess with because magic will fuck your day up. But I wholeheartedly believe that Scott Calvin entered one of these magical bullshit contracts, not with the previous Santa, but with motherfucking Father Time. That's right, that Christmas as a whole is a result of a contract with Father Time. Allow me to walk you through the descent into madness. As we continue along in the first film, we meet Bernard. In the first film, when this takes place, he is head elf, and he has been head elf since 1307 Common Era, which we find out later in the Santa Claus's TV series, meaning at minimum he is 716 years old. However, this is implied to not be the case because in the second film, The Santa Claus 2, he makes fun of Curtis, another elf, whose role, by the way, is the keeper of the Handbook of Christmas, which we'll get to that. Bernard tells Curtis to act his age, which is 900 years old at the time of the second film. This implies that Bernard is older than 900 years, but we don't really get a clear consensus. My guess is that Bernard is very old and goes all the way back to St. Nicholas in around 270 Common Era. St. Nicholas addresses him like an old friend. Oh, and did I mention that Bernard is the keeper of the Yuleverse? Sorry, we'll get to that too. This is important because there are only 3 elves confirmed to be around 900 to 1,000 years old. That would be Bernard, Curtis, and Judy. The rest are younger, and I already hear you asking, well, what happens to the elves as they age? We'll get to that too. Anyways, Bernard breaks the news to Scott that he is now Santa, putting him into this magical contract. He tells him that he has 11 months to get his affairs in order and to be Santa for real. Scott doesn't believe this is happening and it was like all a weird dream. That is until Charlie shows Scott the magical snow globe that Bernard gave him. Bernard gave this snow globe to Charlie the same moment they arrived at the North Pole. Bernard even hinted at this becoming important later, like he knew that Scott wasn't going to believe that he was Santa. He's been through this many times before, and we find out later that Scott is officially the 18th Santa in the Santa Claus's TV series. Now, snow globes in this universe hold memories, more specifically memories around Christmas time. I'm talking about magical snow globes, not the ones that you can get at your local dollar store, okay? The ones that come from the North Pole, silly. Why would you think otherwise? We find out in Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause, that there is an entire hall of snow globes holding these Christmas memories. All of the Santa Clauses have their own specific snow globe. This is to show them that they're memories when they need it most. When it's in Charlie's hands, it shows where his dad, Scott, is at any time. When it's in Scott's hands, it can send him back in time to a few moments before he put on the Santa suit, right before he gets into this magical contract, ergo, before he even has the choice to become Santa Claus. Scott didn't just go back in time in Santa Claus 3, The Escape Clause. He went to a completely different universe than his current one. This one being if Scott didn't become Santa and Jack Frost did instead.
Start spreading the news.
This plot hook in the first movie to get Scott to realize that he's Santa with a magical MacGuffin sets the rules for the entire franchise that I don't think the writers intended. So blame this entire video on Leo and Steve. So the first film ends with Scott delivering presents as Santa. He almost lost his son, but ended up charming Neil, Laura, and all the other people that witnessed him steal Charlie. Though I wanted to note here that Neil was 100% in the right for for not wanting to leave Scott alone with Charlie. Scott agrees to become Santa and has this weird co-parenting situation with Laura and Neil. And that is how the first film ends, by the way. There is only one other important thing that we have time to go over from the first film, and it's a quote from Judy, basically one of the oldest elves, if not the oldest. I mean, it took her 1,200 years to get her hot cocoa recipe just right, and in her defense, I wouldn't tell people my exact recipe either if it took me so long to get right. My guess is it has to do with the markets changing over the last millennia to finally get the ingredients that she needs. Judy is a queen and does not need to explain her exact recipe to a human that does not have the comprehension of being over 100 years old. Anyways, she says this to Scott.
That's not surprising. Most grown-ups can't believe in magic. It just sort of grows out of them. You're missing the point.
What is the point?
Seeing isn't believing. Believing is seeing. Kids don't have to see this place to know that it's here. They just know.
That's not surprising. Most grown-ups can't believe in magic. It just sort of grows out of them. You're missing the point. Seeing isn't believing. Believing is seeing. Kids don't have to see this place to know it's here. They just know. This quote implies a core rule to this whole franchise, that kids are magical and they can create the essence of magic by believing in something. Anything. It is this belief that gives it power, the ability to become real. Moving on to Santa Claus 2, we start off in the North Pole with the introduction to the security system at the North Pole. To give a little canon history here, one of the previous Santa Clauses introduces the Elfland Security Act, which we can also assume created the ELFS, which stands for Effective Liberating Flight Squad. Not Fight Squad, Flight Squad. This appears in the first film. The Elfland Security Act protects all beings and programs going on in the North Pole, so in order to do so, they create the ElfCon system, which determines what activities can go on while there are enemies nearby. You might be asking, why? Well, it's explained in Santa Claus 2 and the TV series that there are a lot of magic at the North Pole, very originally called North Pole magic. North Pole magic is different from Santa Claus magic. Keep that in mind. Anyways, after the threat is dealt with, we meet Curtis. Curtis, like I stated previously, is 900 years old and is the keeper of the Santa Claus handbook. We never get to actually know what's the difference between the card that binds Scott into being Santa Claus versus the handbook. I would make the assumption that the handbook holds more specifics about running the North Pole, elf laws, and information on previous Santas. We can make this assumption because of two things. One, Curtis makes a comment about music making elves more productive and that being listed in the handbook, and two, we see the handbook in the TV series containing information about previous Santas. This is where Curtis and Bernard squabble about telling Santa the second clause in his contract, the Mrs. Clause, to which, if you need a reminder, basically tells him that he needs to get a wife. This is 8 years after Scott puts on the coat and becomes Santa. So where it says timely fashion, it means an 8-year limit. Scott's not too happy about trying to find a wife in less time than a month, but he goes for it because that's all he can do. If he does not find a wife, the de-Santification process begins. That basically means he slowly starts to revert to who he was before putting on the coat. However, he still ages with this process, meaning he stops being Santa, he is no longer immortal. This is very important, and put a pin in it. Bernard and Curtis tell Santa to not give up hope, because if he does, they have to too. Which, in reality, is really fucking dark, because in the TV series, we find out if elves lose hope of Christmas spirit, they get fucking dusted, just like in the Marvel universe, snapped out of existence by a lack of hope. So they are basically pleading in this moment, don't kill us.
Honey buns?
For this movie, the writers introduced like a B-plot, that Charlie is a delinquent and because of his lack of daddy's attention, he's now on the naughty list. This is brought up at the Council of Legendary Figures meeting. Oh yeah, in this movie they introduced some of the magical beings in this universe, finally. There's Mother Nature, Father Time, Cupid, Sandman, the Tooth Fairy who wants a different name because being the Tooth Fairy isn't man enough, and the Easter Bunny. We find out later that legendary figures change with time. This was seen in the TV series with a character named La Befana. However, it's important to note that legendary figures are just the most powerful. There are other magical council members like Jack Frost and later La Befana when she loses her legendary status.
You herald the season. You're not a holiday.
The legendary figures, from what I understand, make the rules and maintain magic in the world by keeping children believing in them. To keep on topic about the legendary figures, we're gonna go deeper into the rabbit hole. Now, of course, there are throwaway jokes here and there, but we get a lot about how this universe works and hints at the TASCU as a whole. In the second movie, the legendary figures have their own little short in the extra section of the DVD disc. It's up on YouTube if you still want to see it. But anyways, we find out that Mother Nature is not mortal. That this applies to all of the legendary figures. The only exception is Scott and his wife, Carol. That they are the only humans to ever be in the Kringle's role, ever. In the extra section, we find out that Cupid doesn't like Father Time. He jokes that he tells stories starting from 1846 until present, going in chronological order in history. However, I have reason to believe that Cupid doesn't like Father Time for more sinister reasons. We find out later in the Santa Claus's TV series that the legendary figures don't mess around with each other's business. Or that's at least how they make it seem. They do have these meetings and concerns and will get involved in each other's business if it will affect the kids' beliefs in them. For example, when Scott tries to retire as Santa in the TV series, they get involved. Cupid acts as a messenger for the group, but he does tell us a few interesting things. He tells us that no magic can overcome first love, which is when someone falls in love for the first time. He does have a bleaker outlook on life. He tells us that life in general takes love away, and he also says that nothing will break the heart more than family. Cupid only deals with romantic love and not familial love, which is much more Santa's alley. But the more sinister reasons with Father Time goes deeper, I believe. So in an offhanded comment, Cupid mentions that it took him 5.5 eras to get Mrs. Cupid's attention romantically. And this is my first mistake that I found. Scott says arrows, and as you saw in the video that plays, it says arrows, not eras in the script, and I totally forgot to check. That is my bad. I wanted to correct this, as I know there will be people correcting me in the comments. Like, absolutely roast me for that one. Anyways, I still think that Cupid is old, as it is implied in a few ways. There has been no mention of a previous Cupid, and it took him 5.5 arrows, not eras, arrows, to make Mrs. Cupid fall in love, which suggests that Cupid's own magic failed him and kinda implies something happened there as he doesn't want her to know. It is also implied that him and Father Time have known each other for a while because of Cupid's opinion of Father Time, which I'll get into. I am gonna get back to the original argument that I was about to make here, though take it with a grain of salt because it is not confirmed as to how old Cupid is. That is my bad, my assumption. He is not confirmed to be millions and millions of years old. Eras, as in several 100 million years per era, eras. It took him 5.5 of them. That would make Cupid the oldest character we know by far. We don't know why though, why it took him so long. And it's embarrassing to him. He doesn't want people to know. But I think it's not embarrassment, it's blackmail. I wholeheartedly believe that Father Time is using Cupid to create time itself. Let me explain. In this universe, legendary figures are the most powerful beings possible. They get their magic by children believing in them, and that they have a domain over something. For Cupid, it's love. For Sandman, it's dreams. For the Tooth Fairy, it's teeth and health in general. For Santa, it's giving. For Mother Nature, it's nature itself. And finally, Father Time, it's time itself. If children believing in something creates magic, as Judy mentioned in the first film, and that magic gives these figures power, then that power can be used in turn to create more memories for the children to have, thus creating more beliefs, which also creates a cycle of generative power. I believe that Father Time has told Cupid, one of the oldest, if not the oldest figure, that he must make creatures fall in love so that they have children, so that children can believe in them, thus creating a never-ending cycle as time goes on. There are more children and more magic. This isn't an out there thought either. If you look at the mythos of Father Time and his actual history on the world, it's kinda dark. He not only represents time, but death. The whole vibe of Memento Mori. Remember, you will die. Here's a quote from the fandom article about him. Father Time's existence transcends the conventional constraints of time and space, as he dwells within a palace that operates beyond the confines of the universe's physical laws. His realm exists in intricate loops and intricate patterns, molding according to Father Time's whims. Within this domain, cause and effect may reverse or sever ties entirely. Furthermore, Father Time can manipulate the aging process of anything and anyone, potentially fast-forwarding the universe to its heat death or rewinding the moment of the Big Bang. He is inherently younger than darkness as he represents time itself, an abstract concept that only emerged after the creation of all existence and its fundamental elements. It would totally be reasonable that Father Time would ask Cupid of such a thing, stating that in order for him to keep time moving, that he would need people believing in him, or at least believing in time itself. If Father Time was in control of time itself, who's to say that he wouldn't be in control of time itself in all universes that use the concept of time? But that's the key word there. Control. I already hear you saying, that's for sure a tinfoil film theory, and cut. Objection! We get to see Scott go through a process called desantification, where he reverts back to his former self before putting on the suit. He still ages, however, unlike being immortal with legendary power. Why would this be the case if kids still believe in Santa? If he derived his Santa magic from the belief of children, then he shouldn't lose his powers. I mean, kids did not know that Scott didn't have a wife and still believed in Santa and Mrs. Claus, whether or not they actually exist. Scott still goes through this process because of the contract, meaning he derives his Santa powers from putting on the suit and entering the contract, thus giving him immortality and magical powers as long as he maintains the belief of Christmas. We don't know who made the contract in the first place, but if Father Time grants immortality to these figures, then it would likely be his contract.
Objection!
But it's stated that Santa gets his powers from Christmas spirit, which is from the children believing in Christmas. After all, he's affected by people losing Christmas spirit in the Santa Claus TV series.
Hold it!
Yes, the belief of children does affect Santa's powers, but it's already been stated previously that Santa magic differs from North Pole magic. The lack of Christmas spirit and the belief in Christmas directly affects the North Pole and the elf. It's also been proven that Santa magic cannot overpower other Santa magic. Like when Magnus Antis comes back to the present from the TV series, he fights Scott. They both take each other out as they're using the same magic, however, at that point in time, Christmas spirit has already been better than ever before. If Scott's magic was measured by Christmas spirit, then the Santa from a previous time should be affected by the differing measures of Christmas spirit, unless they are taking from the same pool of magic granted to them by the Santa contract. That means that Santa's magic is given to him through the contract and not measured by Christmas spirit.
Objection!
What about the elves? They don't age. Are you suggesting that all magical creatures are granted immortality by Father Time? It's already been stated that the legendary figures don't mess with each other's affairs. That would go directly against that. Father Time would have to use his powers to grant immortality to the other figures.
Objection!
Nuh-uh. Fuck you mean, nuh-uh?
Elves can and do age just like with Bernard. All elves at some point go through Cribble Crabble, which is where they interact with the human world. Most elves don't come back from Cribble Crabble, and those who do tend to come back will be in higher standing with Santa. However, if Santa's elves exist because of the belief of Christmas spirit, then it should come to no surprise when they vanish from existence when Christmas spirit is low, as it acts as a punishment when Santa isn't generating the belief in Christmas. Father Time could totally use his power to keep legendaries immortal if he could make them forget that the contract that they agree to was his creation. We find out that there have been many Santas that probably applies to all legendary figures besides Cupid. That means that none of them would have the knowledge that Father Time is breaking the rules. I'm not finished. There have been many Santas, 18 according to the Santas in the Yuleverse, each of them living for about 100 years. However, according to the escape clause, when a Santa chooses to give up his role, he is sent back in time to a point before he puts on the suit. Whenever this happens, if the Santa who is sent back in time does not pick up his coat, then a whole different universe exists where he is no longer Santa, as if it never happened, thus creating a whole separate universe that believes in the legendary creatures and continues to believe in a different Santa Claus. Why would there need to be a whole universe when any Santa can talk to a previous or different version of Santa if his magic was solely reliant on the belief of children. Children believe in Christmas and Santa. It shouldn't matter who's at the reins as long as they continue to believe. Unless Father Time specifically chooses who the next Santa will be so that he could control the Christmas spirit, thus taking that belief for his own power, which then leads to the current Santa finding a successor on the Successes Clause, the final clause in the Santa contract.
Santa is Santa, always and forever, a continuum, not an individual. Thus, there are no past Santas, and the same for Mrs. Claus. I don't make the rules, I just enforce them with steadfast intensity.
Alright, now that all that Santa Claus lore is established, what do I mean when I say Tim Allen as a whole affects Christmas? Well, allow me to get to the deepest level of this madness. Tim Allen has been in quite a few movies and TV shows. Toy Story, El Camino, not the one that you're thinking of, the other one, Last Man Standing, Home Improvement, and Christmas with the Cranks. Besides the Santa Clauses, of course. All of those have something in common, and it's, you guessed it, Christmas. I'm not going to go over every plot point and how it relates, however, I will summarize it up here. Again, by the time of the release of this video, I'll have notes that you can look at. Christmas with the Cranks. Luther and Nora Crank are trying to leave for the holidays to go on a cruise since their daughter Blair won't be home. By a weird turn of events, the Cranks are almost forced and punished by outside forces to celebrate Christmas at home, admitting that trying to avoid Christmas spirit almost ruined everything. How does this relate? Well, it's the character Marty. Marty is an umbrella salesman that knows everybody's name at the party that the Cranks host. If this is an alternative universe within Father Time's domain, then Marty could very well be a previous Santa about to pass the torch of being Santa to Luther Frank. Another tidbit is that the setting of this movie takes place in Illinois too! Home Improvement. There have been many Home Improvement episodes with many holiday themes to it. In You'll Better Watch Out, Tim competes in the neighborhood Christmas light competition. Mark rates his list to Santa, but Brad and Randy tell him that Santa is dead, but a mysterious Santa, which is Wilson, by the way, gives him his wish. There's also a lighting competition almost every single year in the show between Tim and Doc Martin, or someone else in the neighborhood. All of this is for the spirit of Christmas. This one relates because, admittedly, it's a little bit more of a stretch, but however, in each holiday episode, they do things for the spirit of Christmas. Mark's believing in Santa is kind of like the only tie-in that we're gonna get. Again, I'm not gonna watch 9 seasons of Home Improvement just to get some better examples. Last Man Standing. In the last Christmas Standing, Mike's Christmas spirit gets dampened when Ryan, Nick Jonas, the father of Kristen's baby, unexpectedly comes back to town after a long absence. Kristen's boyfriend, Kyle, also doesn't know what to make of Ryan's return. Meanwhile, Ed hires Mandy as an elf at Outdoor Man, where she tries to unionize the other elves to get better perks. This is very similar to Scott's overarching story and the elves in the Santa Clauses TV series. They actually have a war with gnomes in order to live better lives, and the thought of unionization isn't something new within the universe. In the episode Elfie, sometimes the self-absorbed Mandy plays Santa by anonymously arranging a holiday surprise for Blanca, the Baxter's housekeeper. Also, when Vanessa gives Boyd a magical elf doll, Ryan wants to tell Boyd that it's just a doll, but Mike wants to prove to Ryan that a little Christmas spirit is not a bad thing. Again, we get this use and common knowledge of Christmas spirit. And yes, I totally understand that the use of Christmas spirit can absolutely be a colloquial term. I'm just saying that there is this overarching theme of Christmas spirit and familial love. In El Camino Christmas, this one is bonkers, by the way. I implore you to keep up with the plot. This is a much darker film that Tim Allen was in. Anyways, it relates in 2 ways. Tim Allen is playing an absent father with his son who is trying to see him again, much like Charlie in the first film. Tim Allen's character is, for a majority of the movie, is referred to as Charles. Tim Allen's character also has a very deep memory involving Christmas. I won't spoil it. I kind of recommend that you watch it, but it's, again, bonkers. Lastly, Toy Story. Toy Story, The Time That Forgot is a Christmas special episode. However, in the Santa Claus 2, Tim Allen says,
"You are a sad, strange little man."
Which is a reference to Toy Story in general, and he also plays a toy Santa. This all ties in together by just having Tim Allen play these characters. If he is Santa Claus in one universe and Father Time controls the multiverse that uses time as a construct, then any character that Tim Allen plays will always tie back to Santa Claus one way or the other. Any Santa Claus that exists, whether that would be in Home Alone or a different Christmas movie like Klaus or The Rise of the Guardians, any of them also works for Father Time one way or another by getting children believing in Christmas and Christmas spirit. Anyways, Thank you for sticking around to hear this entire joke video I made to make my friends laugh. Do not take this seriously. This was a well-timed joke that went way too far. I hope you guys enjoyed it the most. Thank you, Sawyer, especially for listening to my rambles about the Tasku for the last 3 weeks. If people are interested in a deeper dive into the lore of the Tasku, I will make a follow-up video going more in depth in my 20 pages of notes. And honestly, if I could take the time, I would watch basically every single Christmas movie around this time next year to make it seem that all of the Christmas movies ever made are connected, and I will do that if people are very interested, but I need people interested in it. I have way too many pages of notes, I have way too many pages of the script. Share this around if you would like. Do not take this seriously. This was a joke that went way too far, and thank you to all the people who posted stuff about this and made references to this. I have a whole list of credits either in the description or it's playing right now in the video. Anyways, I wanted to say thank you. If some of your content is here and you do not want it here, I will remove it. No problem, no questions asked. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope I see you for the next one. Bye-bye!